And thank you all for coming. So the first part of this, we're just going to talk about what the CAC is in general and ways that you can become an ambassador if you're interested. So I have some talking points here that I can pass around, and we're just going to go over these to sort of make people feel more empowered and knowledgeable about what the Peconic Estuary Program does. And this way, if you have any questions about any of these projects that are going on, you can ask them now, so that whenever you go out and speak to the public, whenever you're at parties or just different organizations that you're at, you can have some talking points that you feel comfortable with. So as you can see, the CAC Ambassador Program, really the purpose just is to give everybody a more in-depth knowledge about what's going on with the Peconic Estuary Program, so that you can be ambassadors and help spread the word, because we are a smaller group. So the more people we have advocating for us and spreading the word, the better it is. So the first topic on here is the Riverhead Sewage Treatment Plant, effluent and to irrigation to Indian Island Golf Course. This was a project that was started 15 years ago. And it's finally completed, which is a huge accomplishment. It cost over $24 million to complete. And what ended up happening was, this is how the whole process is broken down for people that don't, that might be a little bit confusing for, is what happened was at the Riverhead Sewage Treatment Plant, there was extra measures put in place to upgrade the water even further to make it safer to be irrigated or diverted to the Indian Island Golf Course. So the Indian Island Golf Course would be watering just as any other golf course would be, using fertilizers and that sort of situation to keep the grasses nice and green. So part of that water, that effluent that would normally be discharged right into the estuary, was given extra treatment and then diverted over so that it can be used to irrigate and water the golf course itself. And so that can help reduce the amount of nitrogen that's being directly discharged, and other pollutants that are being directly discharged into the estuary. And the grasses and the plants can help reduce other pollutants as well. So not just nitrogen, but other types of compounds, iron, that sort of thing that's in the water additionally. So we have a video up on Facebook that sort of explains this and the local law that we're going to talk about on the next page. Is there any questions that you guys have about this project in particular? No? Okay.
Chris,
you can, yeah.
When are they going to stop using that effluent? It's only a seasonal use to the golf course. So is it December 1st?
It's just whenever they're done. I think it was just going to be used, you know, as a regular water source for the golf course. So
whenever they close?
Whenever they're done watering, they'll stop using it.
All right.
And I would suspect that if they're going to divert that water, it's going to be the same quality that would have been sprayed on the golf course.
Right. Right.
So it's much
It's
improved.
the same treatment.
Yeah, same treatment.
All right.
So any other questions on that one? If you don't think of them now, that's fine. Don't feel any pressure. You can always email us later and say, oh, you know, I had an afterthought about this, and just feel free to email us, no problem. So the second item up on here is Proposition 1 and the Community Preservation Fund. So in case some of you were not aware, a lot of you mentioned that you're from Southold, from Greenport, out on the East End. If you had chosen to vote, if you flipped your ballot over on the opposite side, Proposition 1 was on there. And that served as two purposes. One of them was to decide whether or not to extend the Community Preservation Fund, which up until this point, which was established in 1999, was mainly used for preservation of land, especially on the South Fork. So with increasing time that's going on, we've been accomplishing that. However, there's less and less land to protect. So one point on the ballot of Proposition 1 was to extend this to further collect the money, the 2% tax, whenever people buy homes out on the East End. And the second one was to allow each East End town, so there's 5 different ones, each East End town would be able to use up to 20% of that revenue for water quality improvement projects. So that passed in all 5 towns, more than half. I think it was each town was at least 70 to 80% of people said yes. So every town will be able to decide their own water quality improvement projects with the guidance of different organizations. And Sarah's going to give us a little bit more detail about what some of the towns have in preliminary ideas of what they already want to do. So were there any questions on that?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, great.
This water conservation act was really successful. It has been very successful, but now it's under attack. One was this recent thing to allow it to spend money for nutrient sequestration, I guess, which I voted yes for. But
Okay.
now locally in Southold Town, it's coming up to debate is that the 2% tax will be avoided for first-time property owners. And so, and now, in other words, this fund, which has been very successful, is now being used as a source of funds or tax dollars that are in short supply for the towns and the county. In fact, the county did steal that money from that fund, I believe. And it's in litigation that perhaps somebody else here knows about it.
I think there's two different taxes you're talking about here.
Yeah,
The one that's being in litigation is the 0.25% drinking water protection tax, and that comes from your actual sales tax. This is solely for real estate transfers.
Right.
And the 2%, there's always been a first-time home buyer's stipulation to that.
Not in Southold, I don't believe.
Below a certain level of property.
But
So it's kind of two different things, and the other thing to stress, I guess, with this is, though there is the possibility to use 20% of this towards water quality projects, it doesn't have to be used towards water quality projects. They can use the 100% the same as they always have for land acquisition, for farmland acquisition, that kind of thing. It just allows 20% to be used for water quality projects should the town decide to use it for that.
I have a question about that, because I'm wondering what each town will decide how they want to use that 20%. I mean, that's still like open book, right?
More or less, right.
And
It
it
can be
doesn't-
up to, they don't have to use the full 20%. They can choose whatever percent they'd like.
Right, but what I mean is how it's going to be spent and on what. That has not been decided yet, right? It's
So
not.
the towns, each town has, is it all 5 towns have some general idea of what they want to do?
All 5 towns
Yeah.
have a general plan. Some of them are more developed than others, but all 5 towns do have some sort of plan on how they do want to spend this money. Some of the towns have specific projects in place, some of them just have general.
There was an idea from one of the biodynamic farmers around, and you probably know KK's farm, that, in fact, he wrote a letter to the Suffolk Times. I don't think it went in, because from what I've heard, it is supposed to be to help people change their septic tank systems or upgrade them, but he made a suggestion that there are ways to teach regular farmers who aren't organic how to change how they work the soil or how they feed the soil so that they don't have to use so many pesticides and nitrogen fertilizers and all. So that was one of the things that some of this money could go to, but that's why I'm wondering if it's all just for septic tank, upgrade.
what I was bringing up is this recent one for Southold Town. I don't know about the other town. It's up for discussion. I think it's pending. This motion is that the 2% tax on real estate transactions will be foregone for first-time property buyers.
It's always been that way.
Huh?
It's always been that way.
No,
That's
no.
under a certain level of property
Under-
value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Each town has,
It's like
each
under
town
every-
is different.
Yeah, each town is different.
It was
But
something.
there's a good elbowing room, or a good room for space to manipulate a first-time buyer. The family could have gone together and most properties here, a first-time buyer has a hard time. I think it's to attract younger people and to keep them here in the community, which is a good idea. But the politicians are very clever, and here is a wad of money sitting in the bank that they would just love to utilize.
Right. Unfortunately, with every good idea, there are loopholes around that, and unfortunately, it
that's
sounds
right.
like that's one of it. But overall, I think that they are going to have some pretty good projects. Sarah's going to talk about that in her part in more detail about each one of the towns.
Just to address your concerns about the agricultural best management practices, we've had conversations with Legislator Krupski about this exact thing, how to implement best management practices, also how to incentivize agricultural practices that use less fertilizers or use organic fertilizers, and he's very receptive to that. So I think each town's going to be different. Southwold's going to be different. South Fork towns are probably going to go very heavily into these septic systems, but Southwold, I believe, very strongly is going to look to agriculture and agricultural inputs, because they're some of the largest inputs to the bay in terms of nitrogen. But that's all on the table.
All right, so we'll keep moving on. Another way that people that want to be ambassadors for the Peconic Estuary Program and CAC members, and this is really easy because some of this is getting in-depth knowledge of each one of these topics, but something really easy that you can do is just to share the Peconic Estuary posts on Facebook. If you go on, we are posting all the time, and the more that you share, the more people it reaches, and we have different events. We'll post information. For example, leading up to the CPF, we were informing individuals what it was, what exactly you were voting on. So that's something really easy you can just do from home, is just to like our Facebook page and then share some of the posts that we have. And we also have a CAC Peconic Estuary Program Facebook page itself. So the ambassadors have their own page in addition to, that's specifically designed just for the topics that go on at the CAC. And then in addition, we have a general Peconic Estuary Program one as well. So that's something really easy that people can do. For any of the, anybody that does not know, we are in the process of updating our CCMP. It stands for the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan. What does that mean? It's just a long-term plan that identifies the major issues with the Peconic Estuary and a lot of the smaller ones as well, and just shows how we're going to tackle that. The last one that we had was, when was it?
2001.
Signed. It was signed and official in 2001. So it's been quite a long time since then. And priorities have changed. So in our original CCMP, we had stated that, for example, brown tides were a huge issue that we wanted to tackle. Well, now we have a lot of other different types of tides as well. We have mahogany tides, which are relatively new. We have red tides and rust tides, and those weren't even mentioned in the original because they weren't an issue back then. In addition, climate change wasn't mentioned, so we're going to tackle that as well. But as we're in the process of doing this, we need everybody else's input as well, so the general public. So anybody here, I have surveys. That's one way in which we can gather your information and your ideas of the issues that you want to be included into this document. So we have that. That's also going to be sent in a follow-up email. So if you left your email in the sign-in sheet, then we're going to provide you all of that information, and you can encourage your associations or your community that you're associated with to put their input in as well. Also, we are in the process of informing everyone about the Suffolk County local law. It is a fertilizer application ban within Suffolk County from November 1st to April 1st. So within that time period, nobody's allowed to apply fertilizers to their lawns. And there is a fine if people are identified as doing so. But it was recognized that during that period, the grass is really laying dormant and it's not taking up any of the fertilizer nutrients that it's supposed to in order to grow. So as a way to reduce the amount of nitrogen getting into the Peconic Estuary, this local law was passed. So we're just trying to inform people about it and say, hey, did you know that this law exists? Because a lot of people don't, and it's right in our backyard. It's Suffolk County, it's the East End, it's all the way up through where the borderline is with Nassau. So just letting people know about it is really important. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is in charge of the next section of our meeting, and she's going to give you an update on what's going on in the office side, so the more policy end of it. Yeah, if you will.
Yeah, so we, as Christy mentioned, we're going through the revision of our comprehensive conservation management plan, which was originally written in 2001. And sorry I didn't bring a copy with me, but it's a very long document. It has a bunch of main actions that we were interested in kind of correcting and focusing our efforts on back in 2001. But since 2001, a lot has changed in our program, in our estuary, and we're in the process of revising this document. And it's going to be a 3-year process. Hopefully we'll be finished with that in 2018. But right now we're starting the beginning stages of getting the public's input on what they want to see in this document. So we've been holding these CAC meetings for the past year or so, trying to get in touch with what everybody wants to see in this document. Going to the South Fork, we have meetings in Riverhead, now we're having a meeting on the North Fork. Just really trying to get what people are concerned with, what people see in their day-to-day life that they want to have our program try to initiate certain policies and actions to rectify those problems. So as Christy mentioned, we do have this CCMP survey document that we've been passing around, and I hope that all of you can fill it out. And at the past few meetings we've had some little index cards that we've been handing out, trying to really get in touch with our members, everybody who's attending, what is important to them about the Peconic Estuary. What do they see that's an issue? What do they want to tell their children? What do they want to preserve for their children about this estuary? So I don't know if we'll be doing that activity today, but certainly everybody who's here is welcome to participate in this revision process. Even if you weren't part of the CAC before, you are now. We got you now. So
If we run out of copies, I can email this to you so you can fill it out online. So don't worry if I don't have enough hard copies.
On here, it has a link to the Survey Monkey, right?
Yes, there
That's the
is.
same thing?
And I'll send a follow-up email to make it easier, so you don't have to type that in. You can just click it.
Okay.
Email. Sorry.
So that's really the beginning process of revising this CCMP. We've been working with Bill Wise to try to get a person to actually write this document. It's going to take a lot of work from our program staff, Christy, and I, and Allison, the director. She's not here tonight, but we're going to be working tirelessly to write this document. And so we're in the process of getting somebody who's going to help us write this, because we got a lot of outreach and education things, we got other implementation projects we're working on, so it's going to take a strong team to accomplish. And along with that, we're looking to hire somebody to facilitate meetings that will be more focused on getting feedback from our stakeholders like you, the public, business owners, other environmental organizations, just to really tackle what's going to be in this document, why, how are we going to do it, prioritize. So that's an exciting thing that we're working on, and I hope that you guys, Kevin?
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
We covered this time. Did somebody explain why we're doing the CCMP update?
Yeah, I already.
You did
got
it
there.
already. Okay, so
Yep.
in short, if we do this right, it sets the principal investment strategy between the county, the state, and the towns over the next decade. So getting it right really matters, and your input and all that is really important. So thank you. I'm glad you covered it.
Yes. So, and just to go along with that, if you all feel that you have played a role in creating this document, I hope that you'll all feel like this is something you want to actually support. If it's, an action that we've addressed in this document that, say, the town of Greenport states in their, action, the Peconic Estuary Program said this is a priority, that's why we want to tackle it. You'll be like, well, yes, that's a priority, and I feel very invested in that priority, and I want to move this forward. So What else was I gonna say? Moving along with that,
Sarah, can I say something?
yes.
As I mentioned before, I'm on the management committee. And I think as we recast this management plan for this particular estuary, we talked about reaching out to environmental groups and getting their input. I think in the next 4 years, it's going to be extremely important that we demonstrate the close interconnection between environmental quality and economic well-being here on the East End. And I've talked to a lot of people who work either with or are funded by federal agencies, and no one's quite sure how to handle climate change for the next 4 years because of the statements that have been made by the President-elect about climate change. So we have to be very, very strategic in developing these sorts of things, not say anything we don't want to say, but put it in a context that resonates with apparently what's going to be resonating in Washington for a while. And you really need the economic piece brought out in these sorts of documents.
Yeah, was there ever a scientific or evaluation of the water quality in 2001 versus today? Was there another one done now? Was there one done back then compared, and then we can see if there's been any change, any positive or negative changes?
We just came out with our ecosystem status report that was produced based on data, on a comparison from 2005 to now, based on Suffolk County water quality data, USGS water quality data. And there has been an improvement in some areas, but there has also been more harmful algal blooms, as Christy was saying. But if you go and look at that document, you can see there's been increases in some areas and maybe not the best.
The water quality is not the only parameter to consider. You want to look at the sort of the ecological health of the system, and there are so many more harmful algal blooms that we now just have cycling through more fish kills, turtle die-offs, and things like that, which we didn't have 15, 20 years ago, and at the level of frequency and intensity that we're seeing now. So it's water quality determines what the biological health of your system is. Our biological health, by any standard, is vastly worse today than it's been in a long time, and that trend doesn't look like it's going to abate until you remove the offending pollutants, which for the most part are nitrogen, which is the whole strategy of nitrogen reduction that is a fairly dominant effort underway right now.
Have over the years, have there been actual scientific studies of what you just said that can compare from the 60s to the 70s, the 80s to the 90s?
In ecological indicators?
Yeah.
Chris Gobler does a map every year that says there's more harmful algal blooms today than there were, what?
Right, but going back to the 60s, the answer is the studies, if there were any done in the 60s, are not at the same level as the ones done now. So no, the answer to that is probably no. You'd have to hunt high and low to find anything on water quality in, because the 60s, I wasn't here in the 60s, but in the 70s when I arrived, Peconic Estuary was a gem. There was very little problems with it.
But in those days, everybody just dumped things into the ground or into the bays
Yes,
or into the ocean.
But look at
So how can that, now there's a lot more people here.
Yeah, the
a
human
lot more businesses
population,
here.
the human population and the development since the 1970s when I arrived here to now is phenomenal.
And the other thing I
But
have,
despite all that, despite all the efforts for environmental improvement, it's getting worse.
yeah, and the reason for it is that development that happened, let's say around Flanders Bay and around Pine Neck Landing.
But aren't they required to have environmental protections?
Well, they're
Septic tanks?
the principal
Don't
environmental.
dump it into the ground? Yeah.
But look at the septic tanks that were put in the 1960s and 1970s.
Yeah,
They have
were
not
now.
been replaced.
Yeah.
They have not been replaced.
Yeah.
That's part of the
But
exacerbating
you said a
problem.
new community.
Well, if some of those developments take 15 or 20 years from the time of their development, let's say 1980, 1990, and they take 15 to 20 years for that effluent to go through the ground, come out onto the bay, and then deliver a permanently intravenous feed of nitrogen into the bay, and that happens by the tens of thousands of units that were built. We're seeing the consequence today in water quality in the Peconic Bay from development decisions and the suburbanization of the East End over the decades of 70s, 80s, 90s, and then the 2000s, near water in particular. So that is the general, that is looking backwards. You know, it's hard to write history in the moment. It's easy to write history after the dust settles and all the people are dead. And in this instance, well, we're writing this history for the moment, and the generally accepted finding is 65 to 70% of the nitrogen from on-site waste disposal systems are feeding and overfeeding the Peconic, and that's going to be commanding a major portion of our time and effort to abate that and reverse it. And the good news is, in cases where that's happened, where you remove the threat, the systems recover.
On a scale of 1 to 100, how would you, what kind of a number would you give, percentage would you give, that is being controlled, that is being controlled? 30%?
That is being controlled now?
Yeah.
It's 0.
0, okay.
Which is why there's this whole new effort to, you know, just if you had a 1972 refrigerator in your house, it would draw a tremendous amount of energy and probably perform badly over time. And we have septic systems that are 1955, 65, and 70 years old, and some are more recent, but then they were never designed to remove nitrogen. So all they do, they function really well as intended. They get waste into the groundwater, and now it's becoming quite obvious that that's overloading and causing these problems. The whole conversation that's starting to happen now with the Community Preservation Fund extension and Suffolk County's Comprehensive Water Resources Management Plan and the governor and the state of New York's effort on the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan is to start to address literally turning the tide of too much nitrogen, and what does that look like and how do you begin? And it's a formidable undertaking.
Thank you for all those comments. We will send you all 5 towns, their general ideas of what they want to do with the CPF revenue coming up. I'll send all that in an email to anybody that is signed up.